Stop! I'll buy those 3 fat maids. Without them, my life would be different," said the billionaire. Everyone thought he was joking, until he actually did it. 3 women nobody wanted, suddenly living inside the coldest mansion in the city, owned by a man who hadn't smiled in 10 years. At first it was just about business, but when laughter and prayer started echoing through those empty halls, something inside him began to crack. Then came the secret, a locked door, a frozen charity, a past he swore he'd never face again. What happens when the man who has everything realizes the only thing he can't buy is redemption? And when the truth about those 3 women comes out, will they heal his soul or destroy what's left of it? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The pale November sun crept over the horizon, casting long shadows across the frost-covered grounds of the Delaney estate. Inside the sprawling Atlanta mansion, Marcus Delaney opened his eyes to another day of emptiness. The king-sized bed, with its pristine white sheets, felt as vast as an ocean around his solitary figure. He swung his legs over the edge, his bare feet meeting the cold marble floor. The chill shot through him, but he barely noticed any more. The house was quiet. Too quiet, filled with the kind of silence that seemed to echo off the walls. Standing at 6 feet 2 inches, Marcus cut an impressive figure, even in his charcoal silk pajamas. At 45 years old, his dark hair had started graying at the temples, giving him a distinguished look that served him well in the boardroom. But here, alone in his bedroom, none of that mattered. His footsteps echoed through the hallway as he made his way downstairs. Each step took him past another framed photograph, moments frozen in time that now felt like daggers to his heart. Clara's smile beamed from every carefully arranged frame, her green eyes twinkling with the joy she had always carried so effortlessly. In some photos, she held their daughter, both of them caught mid-laugh, sharing some private joke he could no longer remember. 10 years. 10 years since that rainy night when a drunk driver had stolen everything that mattered. The modern kitchen gleamed with stainless steel and marble countertops. Marcus started the coffee maker, its gentle gurgling the only sound in the enormous space. His phone buzzed on the counter, Daniel's name lighting up the screen. "Yes?" Marcus answered, his voice clipped and professional even at this early hour. "Mr. Delaney." Daniel's tone carried an unusual tension. "I need to speak with you about something urgent. It's about Mrs. Henderson." Marcus's jaw tightened. Mrs. Henderson had been the head housekeeper for 8 years, managing the staff with what he'd thought was impeccable efficiency. "Go on." "I've been reviewing the household accounts, as you requested." Daniel paused, and Marcus could hear papers rustling. "There are significant discrepancies. Mrs. Henderson has been systematically embezzling funds for the past 3 years. Small amounts at first, but they've grown bolder. The total is approaching $50,000. The coffee cup in Marcus's hand froze halfway to his mouth. The betrayal hit him like a physical blow, though his voice remained deadly calm. "Show me everything." Within 30 minutes, Daniel arrived with a thick folder of documentation. They sat in Marcus's home office, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the frost-covered gardens Clara had once tended with such care. Daniel, dressed in his usual crisp suit, spread the papers across the massive desk. Bank statements, falsified receipts, and doctored invoices told a story of careful deception. "It appears she's been creating ghost employees and pocketing their salaries," Daniel explained, his normally casual demeanor replaced with professional concern. Marcus stood, moving to the window. His reflection stared back at him, tall, imposing, and utterly alone. "Fire them," he said quietly. "Sir." Daniel looked up, startled. Mrs. Henderson, you mean? All of them. Marcus turned, his face hard as granite. Every single member of the household staff. I want them gone within the hour. Mr. Delaney, Marcus, maybe we should think this through. Some of these people have been with you for years. They had nothing to do with... They knew. Marcus's voice cut through the air like a blade. They must have known, and they said nothing. Trust, Daniel, is like glass. Once broken, you can't put it back together. He thought of Clara, how she had always seen the best in people, how wrong she had been. Trust no one again. That's the lesson here. Have their final checks prepared. I want them all out before noon. Daniel opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. Yes, sir. I'll handle it personally. The rest of the day passed in a blur of quiet efficiency. Daniel orchestrated the mass exodus, while Marcus sequestered himself in his study, buried in work calls and emails. He ignored the sounds of people leaving, of lives being packed into boxes and cars driving away. By evening, rain had started falling, pattering against the windows like tiny fists demanding entry. The mansion creaked and settled, its emptiness now complete. Marcus stood in his kitchen, the space feeling cavernous without the usual bustle of staff. He pulled a can of soup from a cabinet. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had to prepare his own meal. The microwave hummed, its light casting strange shadows in the darkened kitchen. When the soup was ready, he carried it to the dining room where he and Clara had once hosted elegant dinner parties. The long table stretched before him like a mahogany desert. He sat in his usual place at the head, the clatter of his spoon against the bowl echoing off the walls. Thunder rolled outside as Marcus finished his meager dinner. He carried his bowl to the kitchen, the simple act of washing it himself feeling foreign and wrong. Standing there at the sink, he caught his reflection in the dark window. A successful man at the peak of his power, surrounded by everything money could buy. Everything except what mattered. He traced a finger along the cold glass, remembering how Clara used to press her forehead against these same windows during storms, delighting in nature's display. The house had never felt so empty, so devoid of warmth and life. He'd built an empire of steel and glass, but somewhere along the way he'd lost his soul to grief and mistrust. The rain continued its steady drumming as Marcus made his way back upstairs, his footsteps echoing in the vacant halls. Each photograph he passed seemed to watch him with accusing eyes. Clara's smile now seemed sad rather than joyful, as if she could see what he'd become. In his bedroom, he stood before the wall of windows, watching lightning illuminate the grounds in brief, brilliant flashes. His reflection stared back at him. A man alone in a museum of memories, surrounded by wealth but bankrupted by loss. The empire he'd built stood strong and cold around him, but there was no one left to live in it, no one left to trust. The storm raged on outside, but inside, the silence remained absolute. Marcus Delaney, the billionaire who had everything, stood in his empty kingdom and felt the true cost of building walls so high that even love couldn't climb them anymore. The morning sun cast weak shadows through the winter clouds as Marcus guided his Mercedes through the modest streets of suburban Atlanta. Christmas decorations hung limply from lamp posts, twinkling half-heartedly in the grey light. Red and green bulbs blinked at him like tired eyes, their festive message feeling hollow and forced. His fingers drummed against the leather steering wheel as he pulled into the parking lot of Elite Staffing Solutions, the agency he'd used for years. The receptionist's welcoming smile faded when she saw him approach. "I'm sorry, Mr. Delaney," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "But after yesterday's incident, we won't be able to help you find new staff." Marcus straightened his tie. "I don't understand." "Word travels fast in our industry, sir. You fired your entire household staff without warning or cause. We have a responsibility to protect our workers." She shuffled some papers on her desk. "You're too demanding. Perhaps try a different agency." The dismissal stung more than he cared to admit. Marcus walked out, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. He drove aimlessly through unfamiliar neighborhoods, past small businesses and corner stores he'd never noticed before. The streets grew narrower, the buildings more weathered. A faded sign caught his eye. Southern Hands Domestic Services. The storefront was small, with peeling paint and crooked blinds. Marcus wasn't sure why he pulled over. This wasn't his usual type of establishment. But something made him park and walk towards the door. Through the dusty window he could see 4 women inside. One elderly lady in a faded floral dress was struggling with the blinds, wiping her eyes. 3 other women sat in mismatched chairs, watching her with concern. Marcus reached for the door handle, but paused when he heard voices through the thin glass. Now, don't you all fret about me," the elderly woman was saying, her voice wavering. "The Lord provides, even when we can't see how. Mrs. Jenkins, let us help you with those blinds," said a tall black woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair. She moved with quiet grace, reaching up to fix the stubborn window covering. "Thank you, Rosa May." Mrs. Jenkins sniffled. "You've always been my rock. All of you have." A younger woman with curves and a bright yellow sweater spoke up. "Maybe we could start our own cleaning business, Mrs. Purley. I mean, between the 4 of us, we've got enough experience." "Oh, Evie." Mrs. Jenkins shook her head. "Who would hire us? The big agencies have taken all my clients. They want young, skinny girls who look like fashion models. Not," she gestured helplessly at them, "real women with real bodies who do real work." The 3rd woman spoke with a hint of an accent, her dark eyes flashing. "It's their loss, Mrs. Purley. My son Liam says I give the best hugs because I'm soft like a teddy bear." "Tina's right." Rosa May nodded. "The Lord made us exactly as we should be." Marcus watched as they shared knowing looks and gentle smiles. There was something about their quiet dignity that held him in place. Mrs. Jenkins dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I just feel terrible. I can't pay you anymore. Not even for last week's work. The bank." Her voice broke. "They're taking everything." Marcus pushed the door open, the bell above it jingling sharply. 4 heads turned toward him in surprise. "Stop," he said firmly. "I'll buy those 3. The room fell completely silent. Mrs. Jenkins let out a nervous laugh. "I'm sorry, sir." Marcus pulled out his checkbook, the leather cover crisp and expensive against the shabby surroundings. "Your agency, I'll buy it, right now. Name your price." But why?" Mrs. Jenkins stammered. "Because I need household staff, and these women appear capable." He glanced at them. Rosa May stood tall and dignified, while Evie fidgeted with her sweater sleeve. Tina had moved slightly in front of the others, as if protecting them. "We're not for sale," Tina said sharply. Marcus wrote a number on the check that made Mrs. Jenkins gasp. "This covers the agency, plus back pay for everyone, plus 3 months' advance salary." He tore out the check and held it out. "Take it." Mrs. Jenkins' hands trembled as she reached for the check. "But who are you?" "Marcus Delaney. I need a full household staff starting immediately. These 3 women seem qualified. Do you accept?" Rosa May stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "Mr. Delaney, we appreciate the offer, but we need to discuss this. We're people, not property to be bought." "Of course," Marcus said stiffly. "But I'm offering good jobs with excellent pay. The alternative seems to be unemployment. Your choice." The women exchanged looks. Evie spoke first, her voice gentle. "Well, it beats not having a job at all, right? And Mrs. Purley gets to keep her dignity." Tina crossed her arms. What exactly would these jobs entail? Running my household, cooking, cleaning, general maintenance. You'll have separate quarters, full benefits, and weekends off. Marcus checked his watch. I need an answer now. Rosa May studied him for a long moment. We'll need to see the contract first, and have our lawyer review it. Your lawyer? Marcus raised an eyebrow. My son-in-law, Rosa May said firmly. He practices family law. For the first time that morning, Marcus felt the corner of his mouth twitch. These women weren't what he expected. Fine. Have him meet us at my office in 2 hours. We'll draw up proper contracts. Mrs. Jenkins was still staring at the check. I don't understand why you'd do this, Mr. Delaney. Marcus looked at the women again. Rosa May's quiet strength, Evie's nervous optimism, Tina's protective stance. They weren't sleek or polished like his previous staff. They were real, solid, present. Let's just say I recognize quality when I see it. The women huddled together, whispering urgently. Finally, they turned back to him. We accept, Rosa May said, conditionally pending contract review. Good. Marcus handed her his business card. 2 hours, don't be late. As he turned to leave, he heard Evie whisper, Did that really just happen? Either we just met our guardian angel, Tina replied, or we just agreed to work for a madman. The bell jingled again as Marcus stepped out into the grey morning. The Christmas lights seemed a little brighter now, their message of hope a little less hollow. He wasn't sure what had possessed him to do this, but for the first time since firing his staff, the knot in his chest had loosened slightly. These women weren't what he'd been looking for, but maybe, just maybe, they were exactly what he needed. The November evening had settled into a deep blue twilight as Marcus's black Mercedes wound its way up the long driveway. Gravel crunched beneath the tires, the sound echoing through the pristine grounds. In the back seat, the 3 women sat in tense silence, their faces illuminated by the landscape lighting that made the mansion glow like a cold, golden beacon against the darkening sky. Rosa May was the first to step out when the car came to a stop. Her sensible shoes touched the ground as she straightened her dress and looked up at the towering structure. Her lips moved in silent prayer. Lord, guide our steps in this new place. Behind her, Evie emerged from the car, her eyes wide as saucers. Oh my word, she breathed, clutching her oversized purse to her chest. I'm going to need a GPS just to find the bathroom in there. Do they make indoor maps for places like this? Tina carefully helped 8-year-old Liam out of the car, keeping a protective hand on his shoulder. Remember what we talked about, Mijo? She whispered, smoothing his hair. We have to be on our very best behavior here. Yes, Mama. Liam nodded solemnly, though his eyes sparkled with excitement as he took in the magnificent house. Marcus moved ahead of them with military precision, his shoes clicking against the marble steps that led to the front entrance. The massive double doors swung open at his touch, revealing an interior that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The entrance hall alone was bigger than some houses, with a sweeping staircase that curved up to the second floor. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow-like reflections across polished marble floors. The walls were adorned with artwork that belonged in museums, and elegant furniture stood like sentries against the walls. Oh, my stars, Evie whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. It's like being in a palace. Rosa May's eyes took in every detail with quiet assessment, noting the layer of dust on some surfaces and the slightly stale air. This place needed life breathed back into it. Tina held Liam's hand tighter as they followed Marcus through the grand space. The little boy's head swiveled from side to side, taking in everything with unrestrained wonder. His sneakers squeaked slightly on the marble floor, the sound seeming almost irreverent in the museum-like silence. "This place needs cookies," Liam announced suddenly, his clear voice ringing through the quiet. "Lots and lots of cookies. And milk, too." Everyone froze for a moment, and Tina's grip on Liam's hand tightened. But then something remarkable happened. The corner of Marcus's mouth twitched ever so slightly, almost forming what might have been a smile. "The kitchen is fully stocked," he said, his voice still businesslike, but perhaps a fraction softer. "You'll find everything you need there." They continued through the house, past rooms filled with expensive furniture shrouded in shadows. Their footsteps echoed off high ceilings and down long hallways until they reached what Marcus referred to as the servants' wing. The term made Tina flinch slightly, but even these quarters were luxurious by normal standards. "Your rooms are here." Marcus gestured to a hallway with several doors. "Each has its own bathroom and basic amenities. You can decorate as you see fit, within reason." He pointed out each room in turn. "Mrs. Henderson, you're here. Ms. Clark, next door. Ms. Alvarez and her son, this suite has 2 bedrooms." The women murmured their thanks, still somewhat overwhelmed by it all. But before they could move toward their rooms, Marcus held up his hand. "One rule," he said, his voice turning stern. "The West Wing is strictly off limits. Don't go there. Don't ask about it. Don't even think about it. Is that clear?" The women exchanged curious glances, but all nodded their agreement. Liam looked like he wanted to ask a question, but Tina squeezed his hand again, and he stayed quiet. "Good," Marcus said. "Get settled in. Dinner is at 7 o'clock sharp in the kitchen. I eat separately in my study." With that, he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading down the marble hallway. The women began moving their belongings into their respective rooms. Rosa May's room was the first one, decorated in soft blues and creams. She set her suitcase down and immediately knelt beside the bed, her hands clasped in prayer. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered, her voice carrying through the old heating vents. "Thank you for sending us where we're needed. Give us the wisdom to help heal this house and the souls within it. Amen." In his study down the hall, Marcus sat at his desk, pretending to review documents. But through the old vent system, Rosa May's gentle prayer drifted to his ears. Her words, so simple and sincere, stirred something deep inside him, something he thought had died years ago with Clara and their daughter. He found himself listening intently as Rosa May continued to pray, asking for blessings on each person in the house by name. When she reached his name, her voice grew especially tender, as if she could sense the weight of grief he carried. In the room next door, Evie was hanging up her clothes, humming softly to herself. The sound of Liam's excited chatter drifted from across the hall as he explored his new room with Tina. The mansion's silence was slowly being filled with the sounds of life. Footsteps, voices, movement. The sterile museum-like atmosphere began to shift, ever so slightly, as these new presences settled in. Even the air seemed to change, growing warmer somehow, more alive. Marcus sat very still in his study, listening to it all. The familiar emptiness of the house was being displaced by something new, something he couldn't quite name. It made him uncomfortable, and yet there was something about it that called to him, like a half-remembered dream. Rosa May's prayer finished with a soft "Amen," and the vent fell silent. But its echo remained in Marcus's mind, along with the strange stirring in his heart that he wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. Morning light crept through the mansion's tall windows, bringing with it something the house hadn't known in years, the warm, inviting scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls baking in the kitchen. The aroma wafted through the halls, softening the cold marble and stark walls with invisible tendrils of comfort. Rosa May moved through the foyer, her broom making gentle swooshing sounds against the floor as she hummed, What a friend we have in Jesus." Her voice, rich and melodious, filled the space with a peace that seemed to seep into the very walls. She paused now and then to adjust, a picture frame or dust a surface, treating each object with careful respect. In the sprawling kitchen, Evie had claimed her territory. She wore a cheerful pink apron with tiny embroidered flowers, her face lit up with concentration as she arranged ingredients on the gleaming countertop. "Now this," she said to herself, "is what I call a proper kitchen." She moved with surprising grace for her size, testing appliances and organizing cupboards with professional efficiency. Upstairs, Tina worked quietly to create a study space for Liam near Marcus's office. She'd found a small alcove that caught the morning light perfectly. With careful consideration, she arranged Liam's school books and supplies, making sure everything was neat and orderly. "Remember, mijo," she whispered to Liam as he helped arrange his colored pencils. "We must be very quiet near Mr. Delaney's office." Marcus sat at his desk, trying to focus on his work, but the sounds of life filtering through his usually silent house kept drawing his attention. The scratch of Liam's pencil as he worked on his multiplication tables, the distant clatter of pots from the kitchen, Rosa May's hymns drifting up from below. He found himself getting up more often than usual, walking to his doorway just to listen. At first, the noise irritated him. It was a disruption to his carefully ordered world. But as the morning wore on, he discovered something unsettling. He was starting to wait for these sounds, these small reminders that he wasn't alone in the vast emptiness anymore. When lunchtime approached, Rosa May appeared at his office door, her expression brooking no argument. "Mr. Delaney," she said firmly but kindly, "it's time for some real food. We're having pot roast and mashed potatoes, and you're joining us." Marcus opened his mouth to refuse, but something in Rosa May's gentle determination made him pause. "I usually eat in my office," he said weakly. "Usually was yesterday," she replied with a warm smile. "Today is today." To his own surprise, Marcus found himself following her to the dining hall. The long table that had sat empty for so long now held steaming dishes that made his mouth water despite himself. Evie was setting out plates while Tina helped Liam into his chair. "This smells wonderful," Marcus said, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "Wait till you taste it," Evie beamed. "Rosa May's pot roast is legendary." They settled into their seats, and before Marcus could reach for his fork, Liam's small voice piped up. "We need to say grace." Marcus froze, memories washing over him of Clara leading their own grace years ago. He watched as everyone bowed their heads, and after a moment's hesitation, he did the same. Liam's simple prayer filled the dining room. "Thank you, God, for this food, and for Uncle Money's big house, and for Mama and Miss Rosa May and Miss Evie. Amen." "Uncle Money?" Marcus mouthed to himself, bewildered, but found he didn't mind the nickname as much as he should have. The meal was unlike anything the dining hall had seen in years. Conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by Evie's infectious laugh and Liam's excited chatter about his school project. The food was indeed remarkable, the pot roast tender, the potatoes creamy and perfect. Marcus found himself taking seconds, something he hadn't done in years. That evening, as he conducted his usual end-of-day call with Daniel, Marcus struggled to maintain his usual professional distance. "They're different," he admitted finally. Daniel's chuckle came through the phone line. "Careful, boss, you might catch feelings." "Don't be ridiculous," Marcus scoffed, but his voice lacked its usual edge. Later that night, as he made his final rounds through the house, Marcus paused outside the kitchen. Light spilled from under the door, along with the sound of voices. He moved closer, drawn by curiosity. Through the crack in the door, He could see Rosa May standing at the counter with Tina, showing her how to mix cornbread batter. "The secret," Rosa May was saying, "is to not over-mix it. Just fold it together gentle-like you're handling a baby." Evie sat at the kitchen island, absently humming "Amazing Grace," while she sorted through recipe cards. The scene was so domestic, so peaceful, it made Marcus's chest ache with an emotion he couldn't name. He stood there longer than he meant to, watching these women who had somehow brought life back into his house in just one day. The timer on the oven dinged, making him start slightly. Still he lingered, breathing in the scent of fresh cornbread and listening to the soft laughter and quiet conversations that filled his kitchen. The sound of their voices mixed with the homey sense of baking brought back memories he'd thought long buried. Sunday dinners with Clara, their daughter's first attempts at baking cookies, family gatherings filled with warmth and love. But for the first time in years, these memories didn't bring their usual sharp pain. Instead, they felt softer somehow, wrapped in the gentle sounds of the present moment. He remained there, hidden in the shadows of the hallway, until the last pan was put away and the women said their goodnights. Only then did he continue his rounds, the echo of their voices still playing in his mind, along with the realization that his house no longer felt quite so empty. The next few days brought subtle changes to Marcus's carefully ordered world. Like ivy growing through cracks in stone, warmth began seeping into the mansion's cold corners. Each small change challenged his rigid routines, though he couldn't quite bring himself to stop them. Evie had taken over the kitchen with cheerful determination, declaring Sunday suppers a new tradition. "Every home needs something to look forward to," she announced, her eyes twinkling as she pinned a weekly menu to the refrigerator. Marcus noticed she'd written his name at the head of the table, assuming he'd join them, without even asking. Rosa May worked her own quiet magic throughout the house. Old quilts, carefully selected from her personal collection, appeared draped over the stark leather furniture. Their warm patterns softened the harsh lines of the modern decor. "These quilts tell stories," she explained when Marcus raised an eyebrow at a particularly colorful one. "Each stitch is a memory, each pattern a prayer." Even Tina, usually the most reserved of the three, had begun leaving her mark. The sterile hallway leading to the kitchen gradually transformed into an impromptu art gallery. Liam's crayon drawings appeared one by one, carefully taped at child height along the wall. Ships sailed across blue seas, stick figures smiled beneath yellow suns, and wobbly letters spelled out, "Our family," above a group of people standing in front of what was unmistakably meant to be the mansion. Marcus found himself pausing to study these drawings each morning, though he couldn't explain why. Something about their innocent joy made his chest tight in a way that wasn't entirely unpleasant. The morning everything changed started like any other. Marcus sat in his study, reviewing quarterly reports, when a sound he'd grown accustomed to, Liam's laughter, suddenly echoed from a direction it shouldn't have. The West Wing. His head snapped up. The sound of small feet running, then a ball bouncing against hardwood floors. Before he could move, Liam's voice called out, "I found it!" Marcus was out of his chair in an instant, his heart pounding. He rushed down the hallway, his footsteps echoing off marble floors. There, in the forbidden wing, stood Liam, his small hand on the brass doorknob of the one door that remained permanently locked. The boy looked up, his face bright with discovery. "Uncle Money, there's a pretty lady in a picture here." He pointed to the frame hanging beside the door, where Clara's face smiled out from behind dusty glass. Something snapped inside Marcus. Fear, grief, and anger exploded in his chest. "Stay out!" he roared, his voice bouncing off the walls like thunder. "I told everyone this wing was off limits!" Liam stumbled backward, his ball forgotten as it rolled away. His lower lip trembled, and tears welled up in his big brown eyes. The sight should have stopped Marcus, should have reminded him this was just an innocent child, but panic had him in its grip. "What's going on?" Tina appeared around the corner, drawn by the shouting. She took in the scene, her crying son, Marcus's thunderous expression, and moved instantly to Liam's side. "Baby, are you okay?" I just wanted my ball." Liam hiccuped, pressing his face into his mother's side. Tina's eyes flashed as she straightened up. "He's 8 years old, Mr. Delaney. He made a mistake. There's no need to terrify him. This wing is forbidden." Marcus ground out, his hands shaking. "I made that clear from day one. And I suppose that justifies traumatizing a child." Tina shot back, her voice tight with controlled anger. "We're not your prisoners, and these aren't dungeon walls. If you can't treat us with basic human kindness, maybe we shouldn't be here at all." Her words hit him like a physical blow, but pride and panic kept his spine rigid. "Perhaps you shouldn't," he said coldly. Tina gathered Liam close and turned away, her shoulders straight despite the slight trembling Marcus could see in them. "Come on, baby, let's go pack." Marcus watched them go, his anger draining away to leave something worse in its wake. He turned sharply and strode back to his study, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Hours passed. The house grew quiet. He sat at his desk, staring at nothing, the scene playing over and over in his mind. Liam's tears, Tina's fierce protection, his own voice, so full of rage and fear. A soft knock broke his reverie. He didn't answer, but the door opened anyway. Rosa May stood in the doorway, her face grave but gentle. "Sir," she said quietly, "you can't heal behind a locked door." The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through his carefully maintained composure. He couldn't look at her, couldn't bear the understanding in her eyes. After a long moment, he heard her soft footsteps retreat, leaving him alone with her words echoing in his mind. Night fell. The house settled into silence. But Marcus remained restless. Finally, well past midnight, he found himself standing before that locked door, key in hand. His fingers trembled as he fitted it into the lock. The door opened with a soft creak. Moonlight filtered through dusty windows, illuminating shapes he hadn't allowed himself to see in years. A dollhouse in the corner, a small bicycle with training wheels, a child's blanket draped over a rocking chair, its pink fabric faded but still soft. On the wall hung a large portrait, Clara holding their daughter on her lap, both of them laughing at something beyond the camera's view. They looked so alive, so present, that for a moment he could almost hear their laughter. His knees gave way. He sank to the floor, one hand reaching out to touch the frame of the photograph. "I can't let them go," he whispered into the darkness. "I don't know how." The words hung in the silent room, a confession he'd never allowed himself to make. Outside, the house slept peacefully, unaware of the crack that had finally appeared in the walls Marcus had built around his heart. Something broken had shifted, like the first stone in an avalanche, but whether it would destroy or rebuild remained to be seen. In the stillness, Clara's smile seemed to hold secrets he'd forgotten how to understand, and the moonlight cast shadows that looked almost like reaching hands, as if the past itself was trying to show him the way forward. Sunday arrived draped in winter stillness, the kind that muffles the world in anticipation. Rosa May had spent the morning quietly laying her trap, strategically mentioning the evening's dinner plans whenever Marcus passed through the kitchen. The aroma of southern cooking filled every corner of the mansion, making it impossible to resist. "Mr. Delaney," Rosa May called out as he tried to slip past the kitchen door around 5 o'clock. "Dinner's at 6 sharp. We'd be honored if you'd join us." Marcus paused, his hand tightening on his laptop case. The scent of fried chicken and fresh cornbread tugged at memories he thought he'd buried. "I have work will still be there after dinner." Rosa May interrupted gently, her tone brooking no argument. Sometimes a man needs more than numbers to feed his soul. In the kitchen, Evie was putting the finishing touches on a pan of cornbread while Tina arranged glasses for sweet tea. The domesticity of the scene made Marcus's chest tighten. "Fine," he conceded, more gruffly than he intended. 6 o'clock. When Marcus returned at the appointed time, the dining room had been transformed. The formal table that usually sat cold and empty now bore mismatched plates that somehow looked right together. A bowl of collard greens steamed next to golden brown fried chicken, and a pitcher of sweet tea caught the light like amber. "Take any seat," Evie called cheerfully, setting down a basket of cornbread. "We don't stand on ceremony here." Liam was already settled in his chair, swinging his legs and eyeing the food with undisguised hunger. The boy had been quiet around Marcus since the incident in the West Wing, but tonight he offered a tentative smile. Marcus chose a chair, his movements stiff and uncertain. When was the last time he'd sat at this table with others? The thought made him reach for his tie, but Rosa May's voice stopped him. "No business attire at Sunday dinner," she declared, reaching for Tina's hand to her right. "Now let's thank the Lord for this food and this company." Before Marcus could protest, they had formed a circle of joined hands. He found himself connected to Evie on one side and Liam on the other, the boy's small hand warm and trusting in his own. Rosa May's prayer was simple but heartfelt. "Lord, we thank you for this food and the hands that prepared it. We thank you for work that feeds our bodies and hope that feeds our souls. And we especially thank the man who gave us both without knowing it." "Amen." "Amen," the others echoed, and Marcus found himself whispering it too, though he hadn't prayed in years. As plates were passed and food was served, the initial awkwardness began to melt away like butter on hot cornbread. Evie, never one for silence, launched into a story about her latest dating disaster. "So there I am," she said, gesturing with a piece of chicken, "sitting across from this man who spent 20 minutes talking about his pet iguana. And I'm thinking, Lord, if you get me out of this date, I promise to never try online dating again." Tina nearly choked on her sweet tea, and even Marcus found himself fighting a smile. "What happened next?" Liam asked, completely invested in the story. "Well, sugar, the iguana man excused himself to the bathroom and left through the back door, didn't even pay his half of the bill." The table erupted in laughter, and Marcus surprised himself by asking, "What did you do?" "Oh, I paid the bill, went home and ate a whole pint of ice cream," Evie admitted. "But you know what? Sometimes the worst dates make the best stories." Rosa May shook her head, smiling. "Child, you remind me of my sister Bessie, always finding the bright side of things. Tell us about your family, Rosa May," Tina encouraged, passing the collard greens around again. Rosa May's eyes softened with memory. "Well, I was the oldest of 7 back in Mississippi. Mama worked 2 jobs, so I practically raised those kids myself. Every Sunday, I'd have them all help with dinner, just like this. Even little Jimmy, who couldn't reach the counter without standing on a chair." As Rosa May spoke about her siblings, Bessie the dreamer, Tommy the troublemaker, Sarah the scholar, Marcus found himself leaning forward, drawn into the warm web of her memories. He could almost see the tiny kitchen in Mississippi, filled with children and laughter and love. The conversation flowed as naturally as the sweet tea, and Marcus realized he'd cleaned his plate without even noticing. When Tina mentioned her dream of starting a cleaning service for single mothers, her voice was shy but determined. "I know what it's like," she said, glancing at Liam. working 3 jobs, trying to keep a house clean, raise a child. If I could help other mothers like me, give them fair prices, flexible hours—" She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. "Sometimes I think dreams are God's way of showing us our purpose." "That's beautiful, Tina," Evie said softly, reaching over to squeeze her hand. The meal stretched on, unhurried and comfortable. When the plates were finally empty, Marcus realized he'd forgotten to check his phone even once. The constant tension in his shoulders had eased, replaced by a warmth that had nothing to do with the food. Later that night, after the dishes were done and everyone had retired to their rooms, Marcus stood at his bedroom window. Snow was falling outside, large flakes dancing in the golden light of the street lamps. The house felt different, warmer, more alive. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the echoes of laughter, stories, and shared moments. "Without them, this house feels alive again," he whispered to his reflection in the window. The words surprised him with their truth. When he finally lay down to sleep, there were no ghosts waiting in the darkness. For the first time in 10 years, his dreams were peaceful, filled with the simple comfort of shared meals and joined hands, of prayers spoken in love and stories told in trust. He slept deeply, without the usual nightmares that had haunted him since Clara and their daughter's death. The snow continued to fall outside his window, covering the world in a gentle blanket of white, while inside, the mansion held its sleeping inhabitants in a warm embrace, no longer a museum of memories, but a home being slowly brought back to life. The December days rolled by like gentle waves, each one bringing new life to the once silent mansion. The kitchen had become the heart of the house, warm with the scent of butter and sugar as Evie guided Liam's small hands in measuring flour for cookies. "Now remember, sugar," Evie said, adjusting the boy's grip on the measuring cup. "Baking is all about patience and precision, just like your mama says about cleaning." Liam's tongue poked out in concentration as he carefully leveled the flour. "Like this, Miss Evie? Perfect. You're a natural, just like my grandmother always said I was." Evie beamed, her own childhood memories of baking with her nana warming her heart. The kitchen itself was transforming under Tina's careful attention. She'd convinced Marcus to let her paint the walls a soft butter yellow, arguing that a brighter space would make everyone happier. To her surprise, he'd agreed without argument. "It's like sunshine," Liam declared, watching his mother roll paint onto the walls with smooth, even strokes. The color brought warmth to the previously stark white space, making it feel more like a home than a showroom. Meanwhile, Rosa May had taken it upon herself to tackle the mansion's endless storage rooms. Years of accumulated wealth had left closets and cabinets bursting with unused items, designer clothes with tags still attached, pristine appliances never unboxed, furniture wrapped in protective covers. "Lord have mercy," Rosa May muttered, surveying another room filled with untouched possessions. All these blessings gathering dust while folks go without. She began organizing items for donation, creating neat piles for various charities she knew from her church work. Women's shelters would need the clothes and toiletries. The furniture could go to families starting over. Kitchen items would be perfect for the church's cooking program for struggling single parents. It was during one of these sorting sessions that Rosa May discovered the cabinet. Unlike the others, this one was locked tight, a small brass plate on its door reading, "Clara's Fund," in elegant script. Something about it made her pause, her hand hovering over the nameplate. She found Marcus in his study, as usual buried in work behind his massive desk. "Mr. Delaney," she said softly, "I hope I'm not interrupting." He looked up, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "What is it, Rosa May?" "Sir, I found something while organizing. a locked cabinet marked Clara's fund. I wanted to ask if those items should also be considered for donation. The change in Marcus was immediate and stark. His face hardened, shoulders tensing as if bracing for a physical blow. "That cabinet is off limits," he said, his voice as cold as the winter wind outside. "Like the West Wing. Do not mention it again." Rosa May nodded quietly and left, but she noticed how Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he returned to his work. She'd seen that look before, the mask people wore when pain ran too deep for words. That evening, after dinner had been cleared and Liam was tucked into bed, Rosa May went to the library to retrieve her Bible. She'd left it on the reading table that morning, hoping perhaps someone might be drawn to its well-worn pages. To her surprise, she found Marcus there, sitting in the dim lamplight with her Bible open in his lap. He didn't look up when she entered, but his voice was rough with emotion. "Clara started this fund, you know, right after we made our first $1 million. His fingers traced the edges of the Bible's pages. "She said wealth was a responsibility, not a privilege. That God gives us abundance so we can share it." Rosa May sat quietly in the chair across from him, letting the silence give him space to continue. "After the accident," he swallowed hard, I froze everything. The fund, the donations, all of it. It was like looking at her heart laid bare, and I couldn't." He closed his eyes, fighting for control. "If I open it again, I have to feel it all. The love, the loss, the emptiness. I've spent 10 years building walls around that pain. Maybe that's what God's waiting for?" Rosa May said gently. "Sometimes the only way to heal a wound is to let it breathe." Marcus looked up then, meeting her steady gaze. In the soft library light, she could see the scared young man still living inside the powerful billionaire, the one who'd lost his whole world and didn't know how to rebuild it. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Finally, Marcus closed the Bible carefully and handed it back to Rosa May. "Thank you," he said simply, though they both knew he meant for more than just the book. When dawn broke the next morning, Marcus sat at his desk writing a note to his accountant. His hand was steady now as he authorized a complete review of Clara's charitable trust. Outside his window, the winter sun painted the frost-covered gardens in shades of gold, as if the world itself was awakening from a long, cold sleep. The note was brief, but clear. "Begin review of Clara's fund. Time to open the doors again." He signed it with purpose, each letter a step towards the light his wife had always tried to share with others. As he sealed the envelope, he heard Liam's laughter floating up from the kitchen, followed by Evie's warm chuckle and the clatter of baking pans. Somewhere in the house, Tina was humming while she worked, and Rosa May's voice carried faintly as she spoke on the phone with a local shelter about donations. The sounds wrapped around him like a familiar embrace, reminding him of mornings long ago when Clara's joy had filled these same halls. For the first time in years, the memory didn't bring just pain. It brought something else too, something that felt almost like hope. The mansion transformed over the first week of December. Gone were the stark, cold halls that had defined Marcus's solitude. Instead, fresh pine garlands draped the banisters, their rich scent filling the air with memories of holidays past. Rosa May directed the decorating like a gentle conductor, showing Tina how to weave red ribbons through the greenery, while Evie balanced precariously on a ladder, hanging twinkling lights along the crown moulding. Liam sat cross-legged on the floor near the grand fireplace, his small hands carefully wrapping homemade gifts. "Careful with that glue, sweetheart," Tina called out, watching her son struggle with a paper snowflake he'd made at school. "I got it, Mama," Liam replied, his tongue poking out in concentration as he wrapped the delicate decoration in newspaper. "Do you think Uncle Money will like it?" The nickname had stuck ever since Liam first used it, and even Marcus had grown fond of it, though he'd never admit it out loud. "I'm sure he'll love it," Rosa May assured him, adjusting a wreath on the wall. "The best gifts come from the heart." The afternoon light was fading when they heard the front door open. Marcus usually worked late into the evening, so the sound of his footsteps at this hour made them all pause. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, his suit slightly rumpled from a long day of meetings, but there was something different in his expression. The women and Liam were gathered around the kitchen island, flour dusting their clothes as they rolled out cookie dough. The radio played softly in the background, and as Marcus watched, they began singing along to Silent Night. Rosa May's rich alto carried the melody, while Evie's soprano floated above it. Tina hummed softly, helping Liam press cookie cutters into the dough. The scene was so warm, so full of life, that Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. Without thinking, he joined in on the next verse. His voice was rough and off-key, but the smile that spread across Liam's face made it worth any embarrassment. "Uncle Money!" Liam exclaimed, running to hug Marcus's legs, leaving flour handprints on his expensive suit pants. "You can sing!" "Well, I wouldn't go that far." Marcus chuckled, surprising himself with the sound. When was the last time he'd laughed like that? "Look outside!" Evie called from the window. "It's snowing!" Sure enough, fat white flakes were drifting down, already coating the manicured lawn in a thin blanket of white. Liam pressed his nose against the glass, his eyes wide with wonder. "Can we build a snowman?" he asked, looking up at Marcus with hopeful eyes. "Please." Marcus glanced at his watch, then at the stack of papers in his briefcase. For 10 years, work had been his escape, his excuse to avoid living. But now— "Get your coat," he said, setting the briefcase aside. They worked together in the gathering dusk, rolling bigger and bigger snowballs across the lawn. Marcus showed Liam how to pack the snow just right, while the women watched from the warmth of the kitchen, taking pictures with their phones. "The base needs to be extra wide," Marcus explained, demonstrating with his gloved hands. "That's the foundation of a good snowman." "Just like a good business?" Liam asked innocently. Marcus paused, struck by the simple wisdom in the child's words. "Yes," he said softly, just like that. When they finished, their snowman stood proudly near the front drive, wearing Marcus's spare scarf and an old top hat they'd found in the attic. Liam insisted on adding a $1 bill to the snowman's stick hand, because he's Uncle Money's friend. Later they gathered in the living room, where Rosa May served hot cocoa in Clara's old Christmas mugs. Marcus held the delicate china carefully, remembering how Clara had collected them one by one from antique shops across the south. "Mr. Delaney," Rosa May said gently, settling into her favorite armchair. "I've been thinking about Clara's fund, and Christmas coming up." Marcus took a deep breath, but this time the pain in his chest was different, less sharp, more like an old wound finally beginning to heal. "Clara used to host a Christmas Eve dinner," he said quietly. "For the shelter on Pine Street. She'd cook for days. We could do that again," Rosa May suggested, her voice warm and encouraging. "Open the doors, share some holiday spirit with those who need it most." Marcus looked around the room, at Liam carefully hanging his handmade ornaments on the lower branches of the tree, at Tina and Evie stringing popcorn garlands, at the way the Christmas lights cast everything in a soft, golden glow. "Maybe it's time," he said softly, surprising himself with how right the words felt. "Maybe it's time to open the doors again." Rosa May reached over and patted his hand, her eyes twinkling. "That's the spirit of Christmas, Mr. Delaney. That's exactly the spirit." Marcus sat back in his chair, watching as the others decorated the massive Christmas tree. The lights reflected in the ornaments, creating countless tiny stars that danced with every movement. In the glass balls, he caught his own reflection, and for a moment he thought he saw tears shining in his eyes. But for the first time in 10 years, they weren't tears of grief. They were something else entirely, something that felt remarkably like joy. The tree took shape slowly, each ornament adding to its story. There were Clara's antique glass birds, carefully preserved in tissue paper for a decade, now flying again among the branches. Liam's handmade decorations added splashes of glitter and childhood wonder, while Evie's popcorn garlands wrapped everything in homespun charm. As they worked, carols played softly in the background, and the scent of Rosa May's cinnamon cookies wafted from the kitchen. Marcus found himself humming along, remembering how Clara used to sing these same songs while decorating, her voice clear and bright as a bell. The memory didn't hurt as much as it used to. Instead, it felt like a warm embrace, as if Clara's spirit was there with them, approving of the life slowly returning to their home. Snow drifted lazily past the mansion's towering windows as Marcus adjusted his tie in the foyer mirror. The house hummed with activity, so different from the tomb-like silence that had reigned just months ago. Delicious aromas wafted from the kitchen, where Evie and Rosa May were orchestrating the feast. The sound of Tina directing volunteers in setting up tables floated through the halls. Marcus touched the worn photograph in his pocket, Clara smiling at their last Christmas together. "You'd love this," he whispered. The doorbell chimed, and Marcus opened the heavy doors to welcome the first guests. Families from the Pine Street shelter filed in, their eyes wide at the grandeur. But it wasn't the marble floors or crystal chandeliers that made them gasp. It was the warmth. Garlands and twinkling lights transformed the cold mansion into something magical. A massive Christmas tree sparkled in the great room, its branches heavy with ornaments old and new. "Welcome," Marcus said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar gentleness. "Please, make yourselves at home." More guests arrived. Shelter volunteers, local church members, and even a children's choir in red robes. Liam appointed himself official greeter, proudly showing people where to hang their coats. "Uncle Money has the best Christmas ever," he declared to anyone who would listen. In the kitchen, Evie wiped her brow as she pulled another golden turkey from the oven. "That's number 4, she called out triumphantly. Rosa May nodded approvingly while stirring an enormous pot of her famous collard greens. "The Lord provides," Rosa May said, adding a pinch of seasoning. "Who would have thought we'd be cooking Christmas dinner in a mansion?" Tina weaved through the growing crowd, directing people to their seats with quiet efficiency. She'd organized the seating charts with careful consideration, mixing shelter residents with volunteers, breaking down invisible barriers with place cards and holiday crackers. A reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution arrived, camera in hand. "Mr. Delaney," she called out, "this is quite a change from your usual private holiday celebrations. What inspired this return to Mrs. Delaney's tradition?" Marcus paused, looking around at the scene before him. Children played by the tree while their parents chatted with volunteers. The choir was warming up in the corner, their voices rising in harmony. And through it all, his 3 unlikely employees moved with purpose and joy. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "God sends exactly who you need, even if you don't know you need them." The reporter's eyebrows rose at this uncharacteristically spiritual response from Atlanta's most notorious recluse. Her camera clicked rapidly as Marcus excused himself to help Liam straighten his little bow tie. As evening settled in, the great room filled with the sounds of conversation and laughter. Candles flickered on every table, their light reflecting off the crystal glasses Rosa May had insisted on using. "God's children deserve the best," she'd said firmly when Marcus suggested paper cups might be easier. The choir began to sing, their voices rising pure and clear in the vaulted space. "Silent Night" floated through the air, and conversations naturally hushed. Evie, who had finally emerged from the kitchen, joined in with a surprisingly beautiful alto harmony. Marcus stood, tapping his glass gently for attention. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to their host. He cleared his throat, suddenly nervous in a way board meetings never made him feel. 10 years ago," he began, his voice slightly rough. "My late wife Clara hosted her last Christmas Eve dinner in this house. She believed that true wealth wasn't in bank accounts, but in open doors and full tables." He paused, gathering himself. "I lost sight of that after she died. I locked the doors, closed the curtains, and tried to fill the silence with work." The room was perfectly still now, every face turned toward him. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "But God, it seems, had other plans. He sent me 3 remarkable women who didn't just clean my house, they brought it back to life." He gestured to where Rosa May, Evie, and Tina stood together. "They reminded me what Clara always knew, that a home needs more than walls and wealth. It needs heart." Rosa May dabbed at her eyes with her apron, while Evie sniffled loudly. Tina hugged Liam close, her own eyes shining. "So tonight," Marcus raised his glass, "I toast to second chances, to open doors and full tables, to Rosa May, who brought faith back into these halls, to Evie, whose laughter chased away the shadows, to Tina and young Liam, who taught me family comes in all forms, and to all of you, who honor us with your presence. To second chances." The room echoed, glasses raising. Rosa May stepped forward then, her presence commanding attention without effort. "Shall we pray?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. Heads bowed automatically as her rich voice filled the room. "Dear Lord, we thank you for this feast, for this gathering, and for your infinite wisdom in bringing hearts together. We thank you for Mr. Delaney's generosity and for the spirit of Christmas that fills this home once more. Bless this food to our bodies and our fellowship to our souls. Amen." "Amen," the room responded. The evening flowed like a dream after that. Plates were filled and emptied, stories shared, and friendships formed. The choir sang carols while people moved through the rooms, admiring the decorations and warming themselves by the massive fireplace. When Evie's turn came to sing Silent Night solo, her voice carried all the emotion of the evening. People swayed gently, some wiping tears, others smiling in peaceful contentment. Marcus found himself standing near the Christmas tree, watching as Tina taught Liam to waltz between the tables. "May I have this dance?" she was saying to her son, who giggled as she showed him where to put his feet. The reporter captured it all, the laughter, the tears, the unexpected grace of this night. Her camera clicked as Marcus joined the dancing, partnering with a grandmother from the shelter who'd mentioned missing her ballroom dancing days. Atlanta's reclusive billionaire hosts Christmas feast for hundreds. The headline would read tomorrow. But the real story couldn't be captured in print. The story of how 3 unemployable women had employed themselves in the business of healing a broken man's heart. As the evening drew to a close, the remaining guests gathered around the fireplace. The choir had gone home, but soft music still played from hidden speakers. Marcus sat in his favorite chair, watching as Liam dozed in his mother's arms. Rosa May and Evie were sharing a plate of Christmas cookies, discussing plans for New Year's dinner. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside Marcus, real, unrestrained, and full of joy. It was a sound he hadn't made in 10 years, and it felt like breaking free. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white. But inside, warmth radiated from more than just the fireplace. Something sacred had returned to these halls. Not just faith in God, but faith in humanity, in second chances, in the mysterious ways love finds to heal what's broken. The night had proven what Clara had always said. The best gifts can't be wrapped. As Marcus watched his unlikely family gathered by the fire, he knew she had been right all along. The morning dawned crisp and bright, Christmas sunlight sparkling off fresh snow. Marcus stood at his study window, coffee in hand, still warm from the previous night's joy. The mansion hummed with life, Rosa May's hymns drifting up from the kitchen, Evie's laughter echoing through the halls, and Liam's excited chatter about his presents. The doorbell shattered the peace. Daniel, who'd joined them for breakfast, answered it. A stern-faced man in an expensive suit stood on the threshold, briefcase in hand. "I'm Richard Palmer from Westbrook & Associates. I need to see Marcus Delaney immediately." Marcus recognized the law firm's name and felt his stomach clench. He met Palmer in his study, closing the door on the cheerful sounds of Christmas morning. "Mr. Delaney," Palmer began without preamble, "I represent Jonathan Thorne." He pulled out a thick document. "Your former business partner is filing suit regarding the reopening of Clara's fund. He claims the charity was fraudulently reactivated and that funds are being misappropriated." Marcus's hands went cold. "That's ridiculous. I founded that charity with Clara. John has no claim." "He has evidence suggesting your new staff members have been manipulating you for financial gain." Palmer's lip curled slightly. "The timing is suspicious, wouldn't you agree?" Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed. Daniel appeared at the door, face grave. "Sir, you need to see this." The headline screamed across his tablet screen. "Billionaire seduced by 3 fat maids. Delaney dynasty crumbling. Gold-digging housekeepers take control. Sources say, vulnerable widower manipulated by domestic staff." Photos from the Christmas Eve party were twisted into something ugly. Rosa May's maternal smile labelled as calculating. Evie's joy painted as scheming. Tina's gentle presence described as predatory. Even Liam wasn't spared, portrayed as a prop in his mother's con. Shame and rage boiled up inside Marcus. The lawyer's words poisoned every warm memory of the past weeks. Had he been played? Was his loneliness so obvious that 3 women could walk in and— "Mr. Delaney," Palmer pressed, "given these developments, I suggest immediate action to protect your assets." The study door opened. Rosa May stood there, concern etched on her face. "Marcus, is everything all right? We heard voices. Did you plan this?" The words burst from him, harsh and cold. Was this all some elaborate scheme? Rosa May's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" He thrust the tablet at her. She read, her face falling with each headline. "Oh, Lord, have mercy," she whispered. "Marcus, you can't believe—" "Can't I?" His voice rose. 3 unemployable women suddenly find themselves in a billionaire's home? Get close to him, make him trust them, then watch him reopen his dead wife's charity fund. That's not what happened. Evie appeared behind Rosa May, Tina close behind with Liam clutching her hand. "We never asked for anything." "No, you just waited for me to offer." Marcus was shouting now, years of buried pain erupting. "Get out! All of you, get out of my house!" "Marcus, please." Rosa May stepped forward. "Let us explain." "Enough!" The word exploded like a gunshot. "I trusted you. I let you in. And you—" His voice broke. "Just get out." The silence that followed was deafening. Liam started crying softly. Tina held him close, tears streaming down her own face. Evie stood frozen, mouth open in shock. Only Rosa May remained calm, though her eyes shone with hurt. "As you wish, Mr. Delaney. We'll go." She turned to the others. "Girls, let's pack our things." They moved like sleepwalkers, gathering their belongings in silence. The Christmas tree lights blinked mockingly as they carried their bags to the door. The lawyer watched with satisfaction, already drafting motions in his head. At the last moment, Liam broke free from his mother's grip and ran back to Marcus. Before anyone could stop him, he threw his arms around the billionaire's waist. "I still like you, Uncle Money," he whispered, face pressed against Marcus's suit jacket. "Jesus says we should love people even when they're mad." Marcus stood, rigid, unable to move, unable to speak. Tina gently pulled Liam away, and then they were gone. The heavy door closed behind them with a final thud. Palmer cleared his throat. "I'll have the paperwork drawn up immediately. We'll need to freeze any recent transactions and get out." Marcus's voice was dead. "I'm sorry. Get out. All of you, out." Daniel ushered the lawyer away, leaving Marcus alone in the vast, empty house. Snow continued to fall outside, no longer magical but mocking. He walked through the silent rooms, past the half-eaten Christmas breakfast, past the presents still wrapped under the tree, past the kitchen where Rosa May's coffee pot still steamed. He ended up in the great room, sinking into his chair by the fireplace. The embers had died, leaving only cold ashes. Like everything else he touched. The mansion creaked and settled around him, already feeling like a tomb again. Where yesterday there had been carols and laughter, now there was only the hollow echo of his own breathing. He sat there as the short winter day faded to dusk. Then to night. The snow kept falling, burying the footprints that led away from his door, erasing all trace that love had ever lived here. The grandfather clock in the foyer struck midnight, its deep chimes echoing through the silent mansion. Marcus Delaney stood at his bedroom window, watching snowflakes dance in the December wind. 3 days had passed since he'd thrown away everything that mattered, and each hour felt heavier than the last. His reflection stared back at him from the frosted glass. A haunted man in an expensive suit, dark circles under his eyes telling stories of sleepless nights. He hadn't changed his clothes since Christmas Day. What was the point? There was no one left to notice. The house felt different now. Bigger. Emptier. Every room held ghosts of laughter that no longer filled its walls. The kitchen, once warm with the scent of Rosa May's cooking, sat cold and unused. Takeout containers piled up in the trash, evidence of his return to solitary living. Marcus wandered the halls like a man lost in his own home. His footsteps echoed on marble floors that Tina had polished to a mirror shine just last week. The Christmas decorations hung half-finished, garlands drooping where Evie had left them, mid-hanging. A step-ladder still stood in the corner, waiting for someone who would never return to complete the task. He paused at the kitchen doorway, his hand trailing along the wall where tiny handprints in green paint marked where Liam had helped decorate. The boy's laughter seemed to linger in the air, a phantom sound that made Marcus's chest ache. The refrigerator door caught his eye. There, held by a magnetic letter D, was Liam's drawing. Marcus's hands trembled as he took it down. Crude stick figures stood in a row, colored with the earnest determination only a child could muster. "Uncle Money with family," the wobbly handwriting declared. Each figure was labeled. Rosa May, the tallest. Mama, holding a smaller stick figure labeled Me. Miss Evie, wearing what appeared to be a pink triangle dress. And Uncle Money, distinguished by a rectangle that might have been a briefcase. Marcus sank into a kitchen chair, the paper shaking in his hands. Family. When had these women and this little boy become his family? How had he let them slip so easily through his fingers at the first sign of trouble? The West Wing called to him, its darkness a familiar comfort. He hadn't entered Clara's old rooms since the night he'd yelled at Liam. Now, drawn by an invisible thread of memory, he found himself standing before the locked door. The key felt heavy in his hand. Inside, everything remained exactly as he'd left it. Their daughter's toys carefully preserved, Clara's books still arranged on shelves, her reading glasses perched on the nightstand as if she'd just set them down. But tonight, something else caught his eye. A leather-bound journal he'd forgotten about, tucked between photo albums. Marcus lifted it carefully, recognizing Clara's elegant handwriting. The pages crackled as he opened it, releasing the faint scent of her perfume. His throat tightened as he began to read. "My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, I pray you've finally opened your heart again. The charity fund isn't just about money. It's about seeing worth in those the world has deemed worthless. Remember what you told me when we first met? Everyone deserves a second chance. Don't forget that person you were, my love. Don't let grief turn you to stone." The words blurred as tears filled his eyes. Clara had known, somehow she'd known he would need this reminder. Her last gift to him had been a chance to remember who he truly was, and he'd nearly thrown it away. Marcus reached for his phone, fingers shaking as he dialed his accountant. "James, I need a full audit of everything related to that lawsuit. Now, wake up whoever you need to. I want every document examined, every claim verified. Something isn't right." The next hours passed in a blur of spreadsheets and legal documents. As dawn broke over Atlanta, James called back, his voice tight with anger. "Sir, you need to see this. The documents your ex-partner submitted? They're forgeries. Good ones, but definite forgeries. He's been trying to gain control of Clara's trust for months. The women were just convenient scapegoats." Marcus sat very still, ice forming in his veins. "You're certain?" 100%, sir. I've already contacted our legal team, but Marcus—" James paused. "What you did to those women, I know." The words came out as barely more than a whisper. "I threw away my angels." The morning sun crept through the windows, casting long shadows across the empty rooms. In the kitchen, Rosa May's coffee pot sat silent. In the living room, Evie's half-finished Christmas wreaths gathered dust. In the hallway, Tina's cleaning supplies waited in their neat row, unused. Marcus stood in the center of his grand foyer, surrounded by marble and silence. The house felt like a tomb again. But this time, he understood that he had been the one to bury its heart. The truth hit him with crushing force. He hadn't just lost employees or even friends. He'd lost the family he didn't know he needed, the healing he didn't know he wanted, and the faith he'd forgotten how to feel. In the distance, church bells rang, calling faithful souls to morning prayer. Marcus remembered how Rosa May would hum hymns as she worked, how she'd told him that God never closes one door without opening another. He'd scoffed then. Now, standing in his empty mansion with Clara's journal clutched to his chest, he wondered if she'd been right all along. The sound of his own voice startled him as he whispered to the empty house, "I threw away my angels." The words echoed off cold walls, a confession with no one left to hear it. "Dear God," he added, the prayer feeling foreign on his lips, "please let me find a way to make this right." Marcus's headlights cut through the darkness as he drove through Atlanta's quiet streets. The clock on his dashboard read 11:35 at night, but he couldn't wait until morning. Not after everything he'd discovered. His grip tightened on the steering wheel as he turned into a neighborhood he'd never visited before. Modest houses with chain-link fences and cars that had seen better days. The streets were empty except for a few stray cats darting between parked cars. Christmas lights still twinkled in windows, though they seemed dimmer here than in his part of town. He'd had to make several calls to find out where Rosa May might be, finally reaching Mrs. Pearlie Jenkins, who'd told him with clear disapproval in her voice that Rosa May always volunteered at New Hope Baptist Church on Tuesday nights. Feeding folks who need it, Mrs. Jenkins had said pointedly. Like she's done every week for 20 years, Mr. Delaney. Some people know what matters. The church appeared ahead, a small brick building with a crooked steeple and warm light spilling from its basement windows. Marcus parked his expensive car, feeling out of place among the older vehicles in the gravel lot. Through the windows, he could see movement in what must be the church kitchen. His shoes crunched on the gravel as he approached the side door. Music drifted up from below. Gospel hymns sung in a familiar voice that made his chest ache. He descended the concrete steps slowly, each footfall heavy with the weight of his shame. The basement door was propped open with a brick, letting out the smell of cooking food and the sound of pots clattering. Rosa May stood at a large industrial stove, stirring something in an enormous pot while she sang Amazing Grace. She wore a flowered apron over a simple dress, her grey hair neat under a white cook's cap. Even from behind, she carried herself with the same dignity he remembered. Marcus cleared his throat softly. Rosa May. She didn't startle or even turn around immediately. Instead, she finished her verse, reduced the heat under her pot, and wiped her hands carefully on her apron before facing him. Her expression held no surprise, no anger, only that same gentle knowing that had always made him feel like a child in need of guidance. "I knew you'd come," she said simply, reaching for a clean dish towel to dry her hands more thoroughly. Marcus stepped into the fluorescent-lit kitchen, feeling enormous and awkward among the modest appliances and worn countertops. Words he'd rehearsed in the car suddenly seemed inadequate. "Rosa May, She held up one hand. "Before you say anything else, sit down. You look like you haven't eaten in days." He started to protest, but she was already moving to the stove, lifting lids and gathering plates. "I've got fresh collard greens and cornbread just came out the oven 10 minutes ago. Sit!" Something between a laugh and a sob caught in his throat as he lowered himself onto a metal folding chair at the prep table. This was so like her, feeding his body before tending to his soul. He watched as she filled a plate with steaming greens, a thick square of golden cornbread on the side. "I don't deserve—" he began. "Hush now," she interrupted, setting the plate before him. "Eat first, talk after." The first bite of collard greens brought tears to his eyes, not just from the familiar taste, but from the rush of memories it carried. Sunday dinners with laughter echoing through his house, Liam's prayers at the table, Evie's jokes and Tina's shy smile, all the warmth he'd thrown away in a moment of pride and fear. Rosa May sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap as she watched him eat. She didn't rush him or demand explanations. She just waited, peaceful as a summer evening, until he'd cleared his plate. Finally, Marcus pushed the empty dish aside and met her eyes. "The lawsuit was fake," he said, his voice rough. "My former partner forged documents, trying to steal Clara's trust fund. He used all of you, to distract me. And I fell for it. I let him manipulate my worst fears about trusting people, and I—" His voice broke. "I'm so sorry, Rosa May. What I did to you, to all of you. I forgave you before you walked down those stairs," she said quietly. He stared at her, uncomprehending. "How can you—" "Because I never worked for you, son." Rosa May leaned forward, her dark eyes full of compassion. "I worked for him." She pointed upward. "And he ain't never steered me wrong yet." Marcus felt tears spill down his cheeks, but for once he didn't try to hide them. "I want to make it right. The foundation, Clara's charity, I want to restart it properly, clear your names publicly. But I need—" He swallowed hard. I need help. I need you." Rosa May studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Well, seems to me like you finally learned what Clara was trying to teach you all along. Sometimes the people who look least worthy in the world's eyes are carrying the most of God's grace." She stood, brushing crumbs from her apron. "I'll come back. Once you've cleared everything up proper, I'll come back." Relief flooded through him so strongly he felt dizzy. "Thank you," he whispered. She turned back to her stove, lifting the lid from her pot. "Now, you want some of these greens to take home? Got plenty here." A faint smile tugged at his lips, the first since Christmas Day. "Yes, Mum, I'd like that very much." As Rosa May packed up containers of food, humming softly to herself, Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. It wasn't the full healing he needed, but it was a start, a spark of hope, small but bright, flickering back to life in the darkness. When he finally walked back to his car, carrying bags of Rosa May's cooking and the weight of her forgiveness, the night didn't seem quite so dark. The Christmas lights in the humble neighborhood windows glowed a little brighter, and somewhere deep in his soul, a door he'd thought permanently locked began, ever so slowly, to open. The January wind cut through Marcus's wool coat as he stood outside the downtown Atlanta soup kitchen. Through the steamy windows, he could see Evie's familiar figure moving between industrial-sized pots, her pink apron dusted with flour. His heart clenched at how natural she looked here, bringing warmth to those who needed it most. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the heavy door. The smell of vegetable soup and fresh bread wrapped around him like a familiar embrace. Several homeless men looked up from their bowls, then quickly back down, as if afraid to meet his gaze. Evie was stirring a massive pot when she spotted him. The ladle clattered against the metal rim as her hand froze mid-motion. "Marcus," she whispered, color draining from her face. He approached slowly, hands raised like someone approaching a frightened animal. "Hello, Evie." She wiped her hands nervously on her apron, leaving floury streaks. I didn't expect to see you here." Her voice trembled slightly. "This isn't exactly your usual 5-star establishment." "I've been looking for you," he said softly. "All of you." A shadow crossed her face. "Why? Need more headlines about your manipulative maids?" The words came out bitter, but he could hear the hurt beneath them. "No," he said, moving closer. "I need to tell you the truth, about everything." He glanced around the busy kitchen. "Do you have a minute to talk?" Evie hesitated, then called out to another volunteer. "Hey, Sarah, can you watch my pots for 5 minutes?" She untied her apron and led Marcus to a small office in the back, closing the door behind them. The room was barely bigger than a closet, with a desk covered in donation forms and meal planning sheets. Evie perched on the edge of the desk, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "Well?" Marcus told her everything, about his former partner's scheme, the forged documents, the manufactured scandal. As he spoke, tears began rolling down Evie's round cheeks. "You believe the worst of us," she said, her voice breaking. "After everything, the meals, the laughter, the prayers, you really thought we were just there to steal from you?" "I was wrong," Marcus said, his own eyes growing wet. "So terribly wrong. I let my fear of being hurt again blind me to the truth of who you all are, who you've always been." Evie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "You know what hurts the most? We weren't there for your money, Marcus. We were there because we saw someone as lonely and broken as we were, someone who needed family just as much as we did." Her words hit him like a physical blow. He sank into the rickety office chair, head in his hands. "I know. God, I know that now." "Do you?" she asked quietly. "Because I'll tell you something. I'll cook for your charity events again, I'll help feed people who need it, because that's what I'm called to do. But I won't cook to feed your pride anymore. I won't pretend we're just your staff, there to make you look good to society." Marcus nodded, throat tight. "I understand, and I don't deserve even that much from you." "No," she agreed, "you don't. But forgiveness isn't about deserving, is it?" They sat in silence for a moment, the muffled sounds of the kitchen filtering through the thin walls. Finally, Evie stood. "I need to get back to my soup. But Marcus—" She waited until he looked up. "I'm glad you came." He watched her return to her pots, immediately falling back into the rhythm of stirring and seasoning, bringing comfort one bowl at a time. Something in his chest ached at the sight, at all he'd thrown away in his moment of weakness. The next morning found him pulling into the gravel parking lot of a roadside motel, the kind of place tourists never saw. The sign advertised weekly rates in faded letters, and the paint was peeling from the door frames. His heart sank, thinking of Tina and Liam living here. He found them in room 117, where Tina was training as a housekeeper. She was showing Liam how to fold towels into neat triangles when Marcus appeared in the doorway. The boy's eyes went wide. "Uncle Money!" Liam shouted, dropping his towel and running full speed toward Marcus. Without thinking, Marcus caught him up in his arms, holding him close as the child wrapped small arms around his neck. Tina stood frozen by the bed, her face a mask of wariness and hope. "Liam," she said carefully, "come here, baby." "But Mama, Uncle Money came back," Liam protested, still clinging to Marcus's neck. The motel manager appeared behind them, drawn by the commotion. "Everything okay in here, Tina?" Marcus gently set Liam down and walked toward Tina. Without hesitation, he dropped to his knees before her, not caring about his $1,000 suit on the worn carpet. "Tina," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I came to apologize. I wronged you, you and your son. I let pride and fear make me forget everything you taught me about faith and family. The lawsuit was false, but my reaction was unforgivable. You don't owe me forgiveness, but I owe you justice. And I'm here to make things right, if you'll let me." Tina's hands trembled as she pressed them to her mouth. Tears spilled over her fingers as she looked down at him. Finally, she lowered her hands and whispered, "Maybe God finally taught you how to see." Liam darted between them, putting one small hand on each of their shoulders. "Does this mean we can come home?" Marcus looked up at Tina, hope and question in his eyes. She nodded slowly, a smile breaking through her tears. "First," she said softly, "we need to talk. All of us together." Marcus stood, brushing off his knees. "Rosa May suggested we meet at her church tomorrow evening. Evie already agreed." "Then we'll be there," Tina said. She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for coming to find us." As Marcus walked back to his car, Liam's excited chatter drifted through the open door. He paused, looking back at the humble motel room where such precious souls had ended up because of his mistakes. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now he felt lighter than he had in weeks. The path to redemption was opening before him, one honest conversation at a time. The motel's neon vacancy sign buzzed overhead as he drove away, but this time its harsh light seemed softer somehow, like grace breaking through the darkness, showing him the way home. The January sun streamed through the mansion's freshly cleaned windows, casting warm light across floors that no longer echoed with emptiness. Marcus stood in the foyer, adjusting his tie and watching staff members arrange chairs for the foundation's launch. The marble walls that once felt cold now seemed to glow with purpose. Rosa May appeared beside him, straightening a crooked name tag on his lapel. "The caterers need direction in the kitchen," she said with a knowing smile. "Evie's about to reorganize their entire setup." Marcus chuckled. Let her. She knows what she's doing. He paused, taking in the transformed space. Gone were the austere paintings and cold sculptures. Instead, handmade quilts draped over chairs, and fresh flowers brightened every corner. It's different now. Because you're different, Rosa May said simply. In the kitchen, Evie had indeed taken command, her pink apron dusted with flour as she directed a team of caterers with the confidence of a 5-star chef. The menu featured her signature comfort foods alongside elegant hors d'oeuvres, a perfect blend of warmth and sophistication. Marcus! She called out. Come taste this crab cake. I added something special. He obliged, closing his eyes as the flavors melted on his tongue. Perfect, he declared. Clara would have loved these. Evie's eyes softened. Then we'll make them for every foundation. Event. Tina bustled through with Liam, both dressed in their Sunday best. The boy clutched a piece of paper to his chest, practicing his speech under his breath. Marcus caught fragments. Thank you for believing. And like my mommy. The mansion filled steadily with guests, reporters, community leaders, and most importantly, women who might benefit from the Foundation's mission. Marcus had insisted on inviting current clients from local shelters and employment programs. This isn't about publicity, he'd told his PR team. It's about purpose. At 2:00 sharp, Marcus stepped up to the podium. Camera flashes sparked across the room as he cleared his throat. 10 years ago, he began, my wife Clara had a dream. She believed wealth meant nothing if it didn't lift others up. I lost sight of that after losing her. But God sent me 3 angels disguised as housekeepers. He gestured to Rosa May, Evie, and Tina, who sat in the front row. They didn't need saving. I did. They taught me that true worth isn't measured in dollars or appearance, but in faith, courage, and love. He outlined the Foundation's mission: to provide job training, placement, and support for women facing discrimination due to weight, appearance, or circumstance. Every woman deserves a second chance, he declared, just like the second chance these 3 gave me. Rosa May stepped forward next, her voice strong and clear as she led the gathering in prayer. Lord, bless this foundation built on love. Guide us as we serve your children. Let every woman who walks through these doors feel your grace and know her worth. Evie's catering team circulated with trays of food as Tina helped Liam to the microphone. The boy unfolded his letter with trembling hands. Dear Uncle Money, he read, his voice small but determined. Thank you for believing in mummies like mine. Some people said she wasn't good enough because of how she looked, but you saw her heart instead. Now other mummies will get help too. Love, Liam. Applause erupted, drowning out the soft sounds of sniffling throughout the room. Marcus knelt beside Liam, hugging him tight as cameras flashed again. The ribbon-cutting ceremony followed, with all 4 of them holding the scissors together. As the red ribbon fluttered to the ground, gospel music swelled through hidden speakers. Rosa May's Choice, a hymn about new beginnings. Reporters swarmed forward, but this time their questions were different. No accusations, no scandal hunting. Instead, they asked about hope, about transformation, about plans to expand the Foundation's reach. Mr. Delaney, one journalist called out, your transparency about your own journey is remarkable. What changed? Marcus looked at his 3 co-founders, now moving through the crowd with natural grace and warmth. I learned that real strength isn't in walls we build. He answered, it's in the doors we open. The celebration continued as winter sunlight slanted through the windows. Laughter and conversation filled every corner of the mansion that had once been so silent. The Second Chances Foundation was more than launched. It was alive with possibility. Around the room, women who might never have been given a chance in the corporate world were networking with CEOs, Evie's food brought people together at every table. Tina shared her story with a group of single mothers, while Rosa May's prayers and wisdom created spaces of peace amid the excitement. The mansion, like its owner, had found its true purpose at last, not as a monument to wealth, but as a harbor of hope for those seeking a fresh start. As spring painted Atlanta in pastels, the Delaney mansion buzzed with new life. Cherry blossoms dotted the driveway where luxury cars once stood alone, and the halls echoed with voices instead of silence. The transformation was complete, from mausoleum to sanctuary. Rosa May's cooking classes had become legendary in the community. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she taught women from the Foundation's programs how to turn simple ingredients into love on a plate. "Cooking ain't just about feeding bodies," she'd say, sprinkling wisdom with her seasonings. "It's about feeding souls." In the industrial kitchen, Evie orchestrated meals for hundreds with the same joy she once brought to her small restaurant. Her laughter bounced off stainless steel surfaces as she trained new cooks, many of whom had never been given a chance elsewhere. "Too many kitchens care more about looks than talent," she'd tell them. "Here, we care about heart." Tina had found her calling managing the Foundation's daily operations. Her attention to detail and understanding of struggle made her perfect for coordinating services. She knew exactly what women needed because she'd walked in their shoes. From her new office, once a cold guest room, she helped others navigate the path from survival to success. Marcus moved through it all like a changed man. Gone was the rigid businessman who measured life in profit margins. Now he stopped to chat with program participants, remembered their children's names, and actually smiled. Real smiles that reached his eyes. His former board members barely recognized him, but those who knew him best saw the truth. He'd finally come home to himself. During the Foundation's spring fundraising gala, the ballroom sparkled with hope and purpose. Success stories shared their testimonies while donors wiped away tears. But it was 8-year-old Liam who stole the show, darting up to the microphone during Marcus's speech. "My mommy says God sent us to buy you back, Mr. Marcus," he announced proudly, his voice carrying through the speakers. The room erupted in warm laughter and applause. Marcus knelt down to Liam's level, then motioned for Rosa May, Evie, and Tina to join them on stage. As they gathered around him, tears streamed freely down his face. "You know," he said into the microphone, his voice thick with emotion, "I thought I bought them that day at Southern Hands. Wrote a check like I could purchase grace. But the truth is, they were sent to buy me, to buy back my humanity, my faith, my heart." The applause swelled again, but Marcus wasn't finished. "This foundation isn't just about second chances," he continued. "It's about seeing the truth God puts right in front of us, even when it comes wrapped in unexpected packages." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the garden's new rose bushes, Marcus joined Rosa May's evening prayer circle. Where crystal sculptures once stood sterile and cold, now women gathered on comfortable benches, sharing burdens and blessings alike. The house that had once echoed with loneliness now hummed with life, proving that sometimes the greatest miracles arrive not in grand gestures, but in the simple faith of 3 women who saw past walls of wealth to the broken heart within. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe. And tomorrow, I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.